All of a sudden, everybody knows you. It's like standing out in the football field, naked, and everybody's in the grandstands watching you.
Hello everyone and welcome to Happily Ever Reality. Today we are talking about the book Becoming Sister Wives. We are finally in part 4. That is the final part of the book. It is titled Celebrity, and we are talking about chapter 13, which was written by Meri Brown. Meri starts out this chapter by saying that she is typically a very private person, specifically when it comes to her polygamous lifestyle. When she was growing up, she had went to a school that was ran by their church, and most of her childhood friends were people that were within the same faith. And when she was growing up and did meet someone that was outside of her faith, she would often keep her guard up. She wouldn't invite them over and would instead go over to their house. She just wanted to be accepted for who she was and not judged because of her faith and her beliefs. Meri is pretty open in this book about the fact that she considers herself to be very shy and reserved. And that didn't change when she met Cody. She still was shy, she still was reserved, and she continued to keep her lifestyle a secret. She felt like it was better for them to stay quiet. When Janelle and Christine entered the family, they continued to keep everything a secret. They referred to Janelle and Christine as sisters, and sometimes they would say they were Cody's sisters. Meri didn't enjoy this. She didn't like lying. She says it's not a part of her faith nor a part of her moral compass, so this was really difficult for her. Things didn't change once they began having children. It actually felt more important that they keep their lifestyle a secret. It actually went from being something they felt like was a choice to feeling like it was a necessity. They had heard stories about people being jailed for being polygamist, and they wanted to do everything possible to keep their family safe. Meri mentions that there are polygamous communities where everyone is following the same belief system, and so they're able to live their lifestyle in the open. But she says she has never lived in a community like that. She didn't grow up in one, and she never lived in one as an adult. They always have had to hide their lifestyle, but they did it right there in the open among people that weren't polygamist. And in order to do this, they had to lie. And Meri didn't like it. She would try to answer questions in a way that wouldn't be considered outright lying. And she said it was a difficult thing to do because you start having to remember who you told what to. And it was difficult for her to deny the truth about herself and her family. It made being polygamist feel like a dirty secret. Meri writes about a situation that took place about a year before they decided to participate in Sister Wives. She had a friend that assumed that her and Cody were Mormon, and this friend was getting married in a Mormon temple and invited them to come. And Meri says it was an easy thing for this friend to assume because the Mormon beliefs and their beliefs overlap a lot. But there was an issue. Meri and Cody are not actually Mormon, so they weren't going to be allowed to go into the temple. Only people who follow the Mormon faith can actually enter because it's considered a sacred place. Meri had never corrected her friend, and when it came time for this wedding to take place, she was really concerned about telling him. She really didn't want to lose the friendship. So she decided the best thing to do was just make up an excuse about why they couldn't go. But Cody was adamant that it was time to tell the friend the truth, to tell him that they were polygamist and that they weren't members of the LDS faith. So Cody convinces Meri that it's time to actually tell their friends that they're polygamist and they're not Mormon, so they arrange a dinner where they all get together. Now, when I say they all, I do not mean the other wives. I mean Cody, Meri, the friend, and the woman he's going to marry. So they all get together for dinner, and Cody asks how they met. And they all start sharing the stories about how they first got together. And then Cody talks about how he had fallen in love with Meri and her father had 5 wives. And then Cody goes a little further and explains that they follow the same faith as her father and that their family is much larger than the friend actually realized. The friend ended up apologizing for making any assumptions and even apologized for anything that he might have said that was insensitive about polygamy. So Meri didn't end up losing a friend, And even though they couldn't attend the ceremony in the temple, they still ended up going to the wedding reception. Things like this made the family realize that they needed to make some changes when it came to the way they were living. And Cody began dreaming of a way to show the world that plural marriage can be so much more than what it's usually portrayed as in the media. They met a producer named Tim Gibbons, and the idea of doing a show was introduced to them. Cody was on board quickly, but the rest of the family wasn't as sure. Even though the rest of the family wasn't as sure as Cody was, he would not drop it. And as time went on, he was more and more drawn to the idea of a show. The conversations went from dreaming to being serious. Meri said there were a lot of discussions about it, including talking about money, schooling, and their living situation. I appreciate Meri's honesty there when she says they talked about money and their living situation. I think that played a huge role in why they decided to do the show. But Meri does say that she resisted the idea of doing it for a long time. She said she wasn't ashamed of their lifestyle, but she didn't want all of the judgment that would come with it, and she definitely didn't want it to happen to the kids. But Cody was adamant that being on the show was important and necessary because they needed to get away from the shadow of Warren Jeffs. They wanted to show the world that polygamy was so much more. But Meri wasn't going to give in easily. She wanted a strong indication from God that the show was something that they were supposed to do. She said that deep down she knew that Cody was right because secrecy breeds evil and unhappiness. So she knew they shouldn't be hiding the lifestyle the way that they were. She wanted to show the world that their family and polygamy was normal, that they have normal disagreements, normal laughter, heartbreak. They live normal lives just the way any other household does. Now, I do want to say something here. Even though I'm sure they had plenty of normal disagreements, I really don't think all of them are normal. I mean, every family has issues, but this family has special issues. They have issues that I don't think most of us can relate to. So while it did show us that they were normal in some ways, in other ways, not at all. I'm going to go a bit further with this and say that the Browns actually showed everyone that some of the worst things we think about polygamy are actually true. But back to Meri. She does end up eventually giving in because she decided it was a good idea for the family to go public. But once the show was being filmed, she was incredibly nervous about the judgment she was going to get from the people that they already knew. She was worried about the kids and what their friends might think. But Leon reassured her that she didn't really have that much to worry about. At the time, Leon was very active in the church and the church school, and most of the people that Leon was friends with were already following the same faith. So Leon wasn't worried about the judgment from peers. And Meri writes about this in the book, and you can tell that she's really, really proud of Leon. And I mentioned this in another video about one of Meri's chapters. You can tell that she's really proud of how Leon was so committed to the faith at the time of writing this book. Meri brings all of that up again in this chapter, and I'm going to read directly from the book. So these are Meri's words. This is what she wrote. She says, "Unlike many of our other children, until that time, Mariah hadn't had a lot of experience with friends outside of our religious community. She is a very spiritual young woman and dedicated to our church. She is naturally drawn to people who share her moral standards and beliefs, which usually means her faith as well." Now, you may be wondering why I'm going out of my way to point that part of the book out. And it's actually the first thing she says that I want to point out. Unlike our other children. She does that a number of times in this book when she's writing about the kids and she's writing about Leon. When I'm reading these parts of the book, I can't help but feel like there's a little bit of bragging that's going on there, which is sort of okay, I guess. But she's always pointing out that the other kids aren't doing what Leon's doing. And there just seems to be this little bit of competitiveness that shows up when they're talking about the kids. And I feel like a little bit more so for Meri. And I don't know, maybe that's just me. Maybe that is just how I feel. When I'm reading it, I feel like they're either bragging about their kids or trying to defend them. But you guys can let me know down in the comments if you've read the book. Do you feel the same way? Have you picked up on that on the show? I just noticed that when Meri's saying, unlike the other kids, if she hadn't put that part in there, I think she could have done it and it wouldn't have felt like it was bragging or putting the other kids down. But when she says that, it just changes everything. But again, you guys can let me know in the comments what you think. When it came time to film the show, Meri said she was incredibly nervous and didn't know how to act. She said it was weird to try to act like nothing was happening when people were filming her. She also goes on to say, "I'm not the actor in the family. That would be Christine." And then it wasn't just her that had some issues with acting normal in front of the camera. She said the kids had to adjust too. She said they were already really excited enough, but when the cameras were rolling, they became downright hyper. Meri tried not to modify her behavior when she was in front of the cameras, but there were some things she said she just couldn't help doing. If she knew she was filming early in the morning, she would wake up early to make sure her hair and makeup were done. And honestly, that seems perfectly normal to me. I can't blame her at all. I would do the exact same thing. Meri eventually became more comfortable with being filmed, and she says a part of that is because they're just doing things that are uninteresting. She says that they're a normal family and they do normal things. And she's right. They cook breakfast, they get dressed in the morning, they drive the kids to school. Those things are normal, but let's get real, they're not a normal family. Hopefully, most families are not surrounded by all the tension and stress that we have witnessed on the show. Not every family is keeping track of the number of days the dad and husband is spending, in each household. Not every family has 18 kids. So while she says they're normal, doing normal things, I feel very confident when I say not everything is normal about this family, or they wouldn't be on TLC. Even though Meri says most of the stuff being filmed is uninteresting, there are times when private things do pop up. And Meri says that in general, the crew is respectful of the fact that there's just some things that they want to have kept off camera. She says the crew will push for a bit of drama, but there are certain things that are just going to remain private. On the other hand, Meri says that she tries to be honest about herself and who she is. She says that the Meri you see on the show is the Meri that you will meet face to face. And I believe that. I think Meri has been pretty true to herself, and I think that because Meri doesn't always come off in the best way on the show. I think she's showing you who she really is, and that's okay. We all have good things about us, and we all have bad things about us. I think Meri has shown herself in many different ways on the show, and some of them were not positive. So I think she's being honest when she says she's trying to be true to herself. Meri writes about those couch confessionals that they do on the show. She says they took a little bit of adjusting to, and they had to learn to think before they spoke, because they would sometimes accidentally answer questions in a way that would throw another sister wife or Cody under the bus. She says those confessionals became a sort of therapy because it always brought things out into the open. One of the things that was really pushed for on the show was the issues that she had with Robyn when Robyn was entering the family. She understood why they did it. It made good television, but she felt like they exploited that storyline. But she says the beauty of it all was that in the end, her and Robyn became really good friends and had a close relationship. The couch confessionals helped with that because it brought up all of the issues they had and they were able to address them. Meri loved how much the family evolved during the first season of the show, and she says one of her favorite parts is the wedding reception. When she goes back and watches that, she is overwhelmed by the love and joy she can see on the screen. There were some negative consequences to being on the show. Before it aired, an article was written in a Utah newspaper about the family, and one of Meri's coworkers read it and was shocked, not by the lifestyle or beliefs, but shocked because Meri hadn't been open with her. And when it came to her job, Meri made sure to discuss with her supervisor and upper management about the show before it aired, and she said no one seemed concerned about it until the day the series premiered. It was then that the Lehigh City Police sent out a press release that said they were going to be investigating the family. The next time that Meri went into work, she was fired. According to her employer, it wasn't actually the lifestyle itself that was an issue, but it was the possibility of the police showing up to the facility. Remember, she was working with at-risk youth. They thought the investigation would bring unwanted attention to the facility and the children that were housed there. This made Meri question if she was doing the right thing. And it wasn't just because she had lost her job, but it was also the impact it was having on the kids in their own family. The kids had heard about what the Lehigh police had said, and they were coming home from school with questions about the possibility of Cody being prosecuted. The kids would see a police car and they were worried that they were coming to arrest their dad. So the family decided the best thing to do was move, and they hoped that this would bring peace to the children. If you're listening to this, I'm going to assume you're a fan of Sister Wives. We know that this move did not bring peace to the children, and it also didn't bring peace to the children when they moved to Flagstaff. I'm not sure their moves were as beneficial as they thought they were going to be. Before I go on, I just want to quickly give my opinion about this. I have always felt like that storyline was greatly exaggerated for the show. I mean, it made really good television. You know, we got to see this family who was living an alternative lifestyle, being persecuted by the society there in Utah. You know, the police are responding publicly and they're fleeing the area. It made some good television, but unfortunately, I just think it was to the detriment of the kids. The move was really, really difficult for them, and looking back on it, it almost feels a little bit silly. If you remember back to that first season, if you think back to it, it might have been the beginning of the second season as well. Can't really recall. But when they're packing to move and Meri is afraid the police are coming down the street for Cody, it just feels very bizarre and exaggerated now and very unnecessary. And Meri acknowledges that the decision to move was something that was difficult for the kids. She says they had deep roots in Utah, and the older kids in the family, were unable to appreciate the positive impact that the show could have, because all they could see was that they had to leave their friends because of it. At the time of writing this book, all of the Brown kids were living in Vegas and going to public schools. She says they were all living their lives out in the open. They didn't have to hide their other mothers or their other brothers and sisters. And Meri says it's not just the kids that were living that way. She was able to introduce Robyn and Christine to a dear friend of hers that she had known for many years. And Meri says it's wonderful. They can go to restaurants together as a family, and they get a lot of positive feedback and support from strangers. A part of being on the show was that people recognized her. Meri says that she was never surprised that people recognized her in her own neighborhood, but she was surprised when she would go to places like New York and Chicago and people knew her name. And she thinks it's funny when people use words like celebrity or famous to describe her. She says she's neither of those things. She's just a mom and wife that happens to be on TV. The shows allowed them to go places and do things they wouldn't have been able to do otherwise. She met Rosie, Ellen, and Oprah. She stayed at a hotel in New York that overlooked Central Park. Meri even got to meet Matthew McConaughey, and she says that she teases Cody about his hair. She says she tells Cody that the only reason he can grow his hair long is because she's a fan of Matthew McConaughey's. I'm a fan as well, but I've never once looked at Cody Brown's hair and thought of him. Meri talks a bit about the traveling. She says sometimes it gets a bit stressful, but they've learned to be patient and forgiving with each other. She also admits that sometimes there's negative publicity, and she's learned to deal with that by ignoring it. She says that she has better things to do with her time. She ends her chapter by writing about how the show has unified them, and now they travel together as a tight-knit group, and they don't let anyone breach their boundaries because they exhibit strength in numbers. And she believes that their strength in the face of public scrutiny is what makes them special and what makes the show important and positive for them and their children. And that is it, you guys. That is Meri's chapter in the part of the book about celebrity. There's literally nothing there that surprises me, really. Everything she said is stuff I expected her to say, so that is it. If you guys feel differently, if there's something there that stood out or something you want to add, go ahead and leave a comment down below. If you like the video, I hope you will click that like button and subscribe and come back to Happily Ever Reality. We're going to finish up these last 3 chapters of Becoming Sister Wives.